Yeah,
Okay, Russ, thank you very much for joining me.
great to be here. Good to see you, Wes.
It's I've been looking forward to doing this one for a while. We spoke about it. I think we may have spoke about it a few years ago when we were in St Andre, and then we mentioned it again when we were in Pedro. So it's great
Yeah,
to get you on, mate, and chat. You know.
good to finally be here. Yeah, to hook it up.
So how's life for you, lockdown wise, mate? What's work wise? Are you quiet? Are you still doing stuff around work, or are you just chill now in lockdown?
Well, we've pretty much closed the ozone office. As soon as the government closed it down, we closed our office down. We can no longer fly, so we can't develop the wings. But we're working from home. We're doing the emails, and we're catching up with administrative work that we've kind of let go to the side for the last few while. So we've been keeping busy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We're mostly working, but I think the whole industry is going to be hit super hard by this. I mean, and I'm not talking about just the manufacturers. The manufacturers will struggle with this because I think glider sales have pretty much dried up for most of Europe and the States and so on, the major markets. So I think a lot of manufacturers will struggle with this, but I really feel also for the schools, the instructors, the guides, all of those guys that basically just have to stop work. I'm fortunate because I'm a salaried employee of a company that hopefully will be able to pull through this. But I do feel for the rest of the industry, the instructors and those guys who will be struggling right now. I remember when we had foot and mouth years ago in the UK, and there was big grants to go to the farmers and all of that, a lot of help for the farmers, but nothing for everyone else who used the countryside, like the instructors at the time. So, but I think this is going to affect much harder everyone in the industry. So it's a big shame. So I won't complain. I won't complain. I am frustrated from not being able to fly. I think this is the longest period that I haven't flown in since I started in 1994. So I'm getting a bit itchy now. And also we've had the most amazing conditions for about the last week now. And just watching these little queues pop off the mountain opposite my house is frustrating. But
Yeah,
we're all in it together. We've all just got to get through it. I think, we all have to be responsible and not put unnecessary risk towards the service, the safety service.
Yeah, exactly. That's the biggest message I think, is because so many people I see on Facebook, social media saying like, "Oh, I want to go fly. Why can't we go?" And I'm like, "You just one twisted ankle. I'm needing the services to come out. You've got to look a doctor or a nurse in the eye while you're led on a gurney with a broken ankle and be able to look at them in the eye and think, yeah, it was worth it." It's just not.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everyone's in the same boat, like you said, mate. Everyone's in the same boat, so we have just got to swallow it. And we're quite lucky in that we have a sport, or we enjoy a sport that gives us nothing but freedom. And for most of the year, we get to take off from a hill and do what the hell we want. And then now it's being told to rein in a little bit,
Yeah, exactly. So it's for all of us personally, it's not a big sacrifice ultimately at the end of the day, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Like you, mate. Really, I sympathise with the people who earn money out of it. But yeah, it's not a big deal. But yeah. So I mean, obviously the weather's turned brilliant here as well. So we've got our 6 weeks of good weather in the UK will come now while we're in lockdown. But yeah, hey ho.
6 weeks is optimistic, isn't it?
Well,
6 days. 6 days.
Yeah, exactly. 6 days consecutive. Yeah. How long have you been out of the UK now for, Russ?
I've lived in France now for 15 years, and I miss the UK. I miss flying back in the UK. There's a certain pleasure about cross country flying in the UK which you just don't get elsewhere, or I don't get elsewhere anyway. I don't even bother flying cross country anymore here in the mountains. It's not pointless, but I've just got other more important things that I prefer to be doing than flying cross country here now. So, but whenever I go back to the UK, it's always nice to get in a bit of cross country because there is nothing more pleasurable than good UK XC flight.
Yeah, and it's the infrastructure is so good for getting home as well. Like sometimes we moan that we've got a 4 hour journey home from Weymouth, but at the same time we land at the seaside. We know exactly how we're getting home. We're not in mountains, we're not in valleys, and it's quite convenient really that we can just jump on transport and we're home.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. I love that. I love the, and I think it's because it's not so good, because it's rarer, because you don't get, because you have to be there on the right day and get the good days. It's more pleasurable, isn't it? It's more rewarding
Yeah.
when you can just go up every day and go to the same spot on the same mountain and take the same thermal that you've done many times before. It's less interesting.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I mean, when you get to fly over the UK countryside and you get to see early spring, then into summer, then harvest, and you see the whole landscape change. Land that you were flying over 5 weeks before is now completely different. It's all been mowed and belled, and yeah, it's superb. I do like comparatively UK flying, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So mate, so at the moment, currently world number one. So that's like coming towards the end of the story almost. So let's have a look back at where you started. How did it start for you, mate? How did paragliding? Because you said 1994. Obviously, paragliding's very different back then than it is now. So how did it start? What was the drive, etc.?
Paragliding was pretty much the same back in '94 as it is now. It's just that the gliders weren't as good, but the same sort of infrastructure was there, kind of almost. I started just at the right time, just as they had pretty much learned from the mistakes of the previous generation from the late '80s, early '90s, and I got started just as the wings started to get a reasonable level of safety. The designers knew roughly what they were doing, I think, when I started. So I think I started around about the right time for this sport. And I started in a boom period as well, when certainly the school I started in down in Sussex, Fly Sussex was really busy. And we had there was loads of students, and so it was a boom period for the sport. And so I'm quite fortunate when I got into it. But I guess my love of flying started through my dad, who was into parachuting. He was in the paras, and was into sport parachuting as well. So he was doing a lot of the early Halo stuff and sport skydiving. So I initially really wanted to get into to skydiving, and I did a handful of jumps when I was 16 or 17. I can't remember how old I was, and then had full intentions of taking up parachuting. But then my brother started paragliding, and my dad also had a bad parachuting accident. So, for the sake of my mother's sanity, me and my brother did paragliding instead, because it was much safer, obviously. Well, that's what we told her anyway. And so, yeah, as soon as I left university, I worked enough to pay off my student debts to be able to buy a new wing and complete my course. Well, it was not a new wing; it was a second-hand old Falhawk Apex. No, Falhawk Atos. It was. I think it was called Atoll. Falhawk Atoll. Yeah. So it was a bit of a dodgy start of flying, but I picked it up soon enough.
And what was the back then? Was it just literally just paragliding for paragliding? Did you have your sights set on something like racing or cross country, or it was just paragliding for the sake of being in the air? What was like the?
No, it's just for being in the air as well, and I just loved being in the air. I just loved flying. I couldn't get over the pleasure I was getting from flying, just being in the air, looking at your feet down at the countryside below you, and the feeling of being lifted as well, which was amazing, because I spent a lot of time just doing top to bottoms. So that feeling of being lifted and sustained in the air for me was incredibly addictive. And it just got me at a crossroads in life where I didn't really know which direction I wanted to go in, or certainly what I wanted to do when I was younger was not something that I wanted to do at the time. And so I soon got a job with Tim Cox at Fly Sussex, and worked as a TI for him, and spent 10 very happy years there teaching paragliding.
Amazing. That's so you were literally you found it, you fell in love with it, and you stuck with it. That saw you then through from there straight through into ozone.
Yeah, it started with ozone in 2004, and in those 10 years working at Sussex, I was fortunate to be able to fly and learn with a really good group of pilots. And my flying progressed. I started doing competitions and so on, and then got to know Rob Whittle at Ozone, and eventually they offered me a job as a test pilot, and I've been doing that for the last 15 years or so now. Yeah, 16 years maybe. Yeah, coming up. Wow. Yeah, and I really enjoy it. It's something that you're learning all the time. You're learning new techniques. You're learning about glider development. You're learning about the changes that we make in the design and how that relates to the way the wing flies, and just it's just a very interesting process that I'm really into.
I mean, you don't want to portray it as you get to go out and fly paragliders and have fun all the time at all, Russ, do you? I mean, that's not how it should be portrayed. It's just flying paragliders and having fun.
We do have fun. We do have a lot of flying, and you know what it's like with flying, Wes. It's there's days that you love it. There's days that you're not so keen on it. There's days where it's dangerous. There's days when it's like a love affair with a woman, isn't it? It's like a marriage, that you've got to go through the rough and the smooth, and there's a lot of rough with flying. But I still, I'm very passionate about it, and I think to do the job that I do, you have to love flying. I mean, you have to really love it, because if you don't really love it, you'll get sick of it quite quickly, because we do a lot of flying.
I mean, I guess it's full immersion for you. It's full immersion on days when, I don't know, you just can't be bothered, but that's still your job. You have to, like, that's what you have to go and do. And I mean, there's times when I've been at comps and I've woke up and I thought, I could just do with a weather hold today, or I could just do it not, and then you go and you have to fly. So to have to do that when it's not a competition, because as soon as the comp starts, I'm like everyone else, you just want to win the comp. So, but when you're just doing it for a day-to-day job, I can imagine it would get tedious might be the wrong word, but I should imagine it would get a little bit like go on and fly again.
Yeah, because I mean now, especially now when like for me, when I've been flying for so long, that if I have an hour in the air, half an hour of flight, I'm done for the day almost. It's kind of it's scratched my itch. But when you then have to do several flights and you have to fly the extra larges or the extra smalls, so I don't complain. It's a good job. I don't complain. But it's not just having fun. We do. There's a very good work ethic in Ozone, and we're constantly working, we're constantly developing, trying new things, trying to really clinically assess the changes that we've made, so that we can learn for future projects. Everything's interchangeable between the different wings, so we're always experimenting. We always have a hypothesis. We test the hypothesis, and we see if it's a useful direction or not. It's a very holistic way of kind of design. Often we try one thing, and in the end, it's the exact opposite of what we initially thought that was what we were looking for, and often we just don't understand it. There's a lot of areas in paragliding design which is still not fully understood by designers, I think, because it's such a simple yet complex structure. Rigid wings are easy because you can model them, but a soft floppy piece of cloth that creases and moves in an infinite different number of different ways is quite hard to model and understand.
Yeah, I guess it's from the outside looking in, it would probably be difficult to replicate the same sort of things over and over again as well in test situation. I mean, you can replicate collapses, but if you're looking for a certain behavior or a certain pattern, I guess that is very difficult to replicate time after time after time, and you may have to do something 3, 4, 5 times to get the same reaction you were looking for in the beginning, because it is just a piece of fabric and air.
Yeah, well, we're testing like collapse testing, behavior testing is another side of it. But that when we're testing here in the south of France, we're always in moving air. So the most important thing is to be able to differentiate between glider behavior and air behavior and the movement of air and the way that affects the movement of the wing. But that's an ongoing problem that takes time and experience to kind of learn. And there's certain days where, for example, when it's really the steaming, strong conditions in the summer and at midday, there's no point in doing full speed side collapses on a competition wing because you're not going to see the behavior of the wing. You're just going to see the behavior of the wing in that turbulated air. So when we're looking for certification type testing, then we need calmer air, really. Yeah.
So are you in charge of all the elements at Ozone wing wise, from A wings all the way up to comp wings, from your deltas to, do you take care of everything, or is everything sort of signed off and you particularly like the two liners because it's what you spend your time flying on, or do you literally just have an overview of everything and everyone has an input? Is there like a group that come together and you assess every wing, or?
Oh no, it's very much a team effort. There's 5 of us in the R&D department at Ozone. There's David and Luke and Fred, Honorat and myself. David kind of mostly does his design on the paramotor range. He also designs the beginner wings and the ENB wings and ENA type wings, like the rushes, the buzzes, and so on. And then Luke and Fred kind of do more design in the ENC and the END categories. And then much of the testing and the flying and the development flying is done by Honor and myself. So we all work together. Honor and myself, we fly all the wings from paramotor wings to beginner wings to the ground handling wing up to the Enzo competition wing.
Okay. Yeah, I did often wonder whether you have your little side bits and you're like, oh, I really just want to work on this, I just want to work on this, or whether it's just, everyone has to put in the bucket, everyone has to contribute, It's for me, from the outside looking in, I sort of see it as, I've watched a documentary recently about an F1 team on Netflix. It's called Survive to Drive, and it's about their whole how they build a car from scratch, take everything, and then next year they come back and they've got the car that they used the year before, but although it, for all intents and purposes, will look exactly like the same car, it's almost stripped back and they just use principles to redevelop that car. And that's sort of how I imagine the building of, say, the Enzo 4 is from the Enzo 3, or the Delta 4 from just, you've got your plan, this worked here, let's not just copy it, we need to build on it and develop that plan.
Sometimes that happens. Sometimes that happens with a glider or a glider within a range, but mostly I like to imagine it as one continual line, where the Buzz 1, for example, we made, I don't know how many prototypes we made at that stage, but let's say we made 10 prototypes, and the 10th one was the one that kind of met the requirements that we were looking for at the time. That's the one that goes to certification. That's the one that goes into production. Once we start working on the Buzz 2, the replacement, we start from the proto number 10 and we make number 11, and we keep going from there. We learn from the lessons that we learned in the previous development and continue that on for the replacement. Starting from scratch again is quite hard and quite difficult, and eventually you run out of ideas from doing that, and you end up going back to previous designs. So I prefer to think of the development, and I think the majority of our development of our wings at Ozone is more on a continuum, and that way we can, we release a wing, we get the feedback from everyone, we know where it sits, we know how it works, we see where it is in terms of performance and feel, and we use all that feedback as a basis to start the new product. But we'll always start from the original. And when we we're flying, we're always using the original as our reference. You know, if we want to know if we're improving the precision in the turn or something like that, we only know if we've improved the precision in the turn by flying it on the same day as the original model. This because, like I said earlier, the air has such an influence on the way the wing feels and behaves that a wing that feels great one day doesn't feel so good on another day, and so on. So it takes a lot of flying, it takes a lot of testing and confirmation to really make sure that we're feeling the same things. And what we find when we have with a test team like we have is that we can go out on a day and all have completely different feelings or sensations and feelings under the wing. And we'll make changes, and eventually once we get to the point where we all feel the same, we all think the same, we all have the same opinion about the wing, we know we're getting into something that is good or bad or something. Yeah, but the process doesn't happen overnight. It can take a long time to develop a wing. We're fortunate because we have a relatively large team, so we can dedicate a group that are just kind of designing and a group that are just flying, because it's very important for us to put as much time on the wings as possible before they're released to the public.
Yeah. So is that how something like the Xeno comes about? Because I don't know if you guys call it a Xeno or a Zeno, but because it sort of almost came out of nowhere, but sort of changed everything a little bit. It was just so, it just created that group of wing that was just, for me, the Xeno's the best cross-country paraglider on Earth for me, of all the ones that I've flown, and that's including my Enzo 3. I think if I was just flying for the sake of doing cross-countries, why be on my Enzo 3? If I'm flying in a comp, I'm going to be on my Enzo 3. So for me, I think the Xeno is probably the best cross-country glider I've ever flown, and it fits that perfectly. And it looked to me, you may or may not want to say this, it looked to me like everyone sort of tried to rush to find an answer or their version of the Xeno once it had been released and it did so well. So is that, you think that's why the Xeno comes about, because of how you guys have approached it?
Well, I think
or has it been running a long time?
No, I mean, I tend to agree with you in terms of as a cross-country wing, in terms of ease of use, in terms of the performance and the ease of use that the glider gave, along with the two-liner element, was really special in that wing. I think there were other wings before that. That was our first effort at making a two-liner that wasn't. Well, we'd done it a few years ago actually. We made lower aspect two-liner wing, but didn't get it working particularly well. But I think the Niviuk Ice Peak was also a pretty good wing at the time. That was quite easy to use, but easier than the Enzo at the time. But when we were working on the Xeno project, we knew we had something good. Certainly near the end, it took quite a few prototypes to get there that we weren't happy with. It was quite easy to make an uncomfortable two-liner, but it wasn't particularly easy to make a comfortable two-liner that was also a pleasure to fly. There's always a balance and a trade-off, and it's always impossible to keep everybody happy, because for one person who finds a wing dull, another person finds it comfortable, and another person who finds a wing feeling and good, another pilot will find it uncomfortable. So we're always trying to strike a balance. But I think on balance, I think the Xeno was a really good wing at the time in terms of performance, ease of use, and fun of flying. The difficulty, though, is replacing that and making it better. But that's something that we were just getting our teeth into before the lockdown came. We've got some really interesting prototypes. We had the last one I was flying, it was just exquisite handling. So I'm itching. I'm just itching to get back in there. Well, we're all itching to get back to actually fly this prototype more. And I think Luke has also spent the time making another prototype, so that should be sitting on the doorstep when we get back. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back into that project. I think we've got good things coming. I'm quite convinced of it.
Yeah, I mean, that you've sort of with that and the Enzo 3, you've sort of made your job a lot harder with both of those wings, I guess, because they've both been so good. What you come out with to replace them is obviously the pressure's on you that you have to, well, actually we really have to make sure that this is the next best thing, and anything we do change are elements that are an improvement.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's always the way. It's the same for every manufacturer. For every designer and design team, it gets harder and harder to improve on something because, if you look at, take Jin for example, who's been designing wings for the last 30 years, it does get harder and harder. You run out of ideas, you don't know which way to push, and the job is always going to get more difficult. We're going to get into kind of the apex of design. We're near limitations in terms of line diameters and line strength. We're near limitations in terms of aspect ratio and structure and profiles and so on. So I think that the gains in the future will be smaller. What we're really trying to do is improve the feeling, improve the sensation that the wing can give you, and work on ways of also keeping the safety, improving the safety as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I went Ice Peak 6 to, did I go Ice Peak 6 and Enzo? I think I went to Enzo straight after Ice Peak 6 Xeno Enzo. I went, and the Enzo's the nicest wing I've ever flown. I love the Enzo.
You were talking the Enzo 3, yeah?
Enzo 3, sorry, Enzo 3, yeah. Enzo 3. I love my Enzo 3. I love everything about it. I love that if you don't check the tips on the outside, they'll curl in, and I just love everything about the Enzo 3. I love the way it races, and I would happily pick up my Enzo 3 over all of my other wings that I've got, even if I'm just going to boat around. I absolutely love it. So for me, that was my first comp wing as well. Last year was my first proper having a go at comps a little bit. So to get on it, and in my first comp to push as hard as I pushed, and I was really happy with the result that I got. So that for me, I was like, this wing's, it's you can be as good a pilot as you want, but if you're not comfortable on your wing, I've seen, as you have as well, many times I should imagine, good pilots not have a good comp because they're not comfortable on the wing they're flying, or they've chipped the wing and it doesn't suit them. But for me, I got on it. I sat on the Enzo. I went to Pedro, and it was a bit of a baptism of fire, really, in that I'd had about 2 hours on it in the UK, XC, and then I went to Pedro, launched the first day, and we were in 8 meter a second thunderous climb.
Yeah, it was turbulent, wasn't it? The first day I flew, which was just at the end of the training camp, was really turbulent, I found.
Yeah,
but I think you picked a good wing to come into the comps on. The Enzo 3 was a really good improvement over the Enzo 2, and we solved a lot of niggling little issues that we had with the Enzo 2. Structurally, the 3 was really good, so it stays cohesive in the thermals. Often with the Enzo 2, for example, when you got into a turbulent bit of lift, the glider would break down a little bit, and you'd have to wait for it to kind of settle before you can make it turn. Whereas the 3 remains much more compact, even in turbulent air. So the handling is always there for you whenever you need it. But and also it had less problems with cravats and the like. Yeah. And it was more stable. I think I had more. I think I've only taken about 2 or 3 collapses in anger. Proper. I mean, I'm not talking about wingtips. I'm talking about an unloading type collapse. I think I only had 2 or 3 on the Enzo 3 in a couple of seasons of flying it. So really happy with the Enzo 3. But like I said, it makes it harder to improve on that. But again, that's another mission that we'll have this. We're meant to be working on it right now. Luke's made a few prototypes. We have done some work. We made a prototype last year. We made a high aspect one, a really aspecty one, which was really sweet to fly. It opened my eyes actually, because it's the first time I've flown a more aspecty wing than the Enzo that was actually nice to fly. So we can make Aspect with better handling than we have already on the Enzo 3. I know that. Personally, I don't want to go too Aspect-y. I think the part of the success of the Enzo 3 is the fact that it's easy to fly, or relatively easy to fly for a competition wing, and it gives you that feeling of comfort and safety, which is really important, because if you're, especially when you're pushing hard in competitions and you're racing and it's turbulent and you're near the rocks or whatever, you need something that you have absolute confidence in. Yeah. If you've got a wing that is not really, it can be good in very light conditions, but in stronger, more turbulent conditions, if it's giving you a bit harder or too much feedback, you're less confident and you're not going to get the most out of it. So I think keeping that ease of use, that friendliness to the Enzo is a really important ingredient that we don't want to lose. We don't want to lose.
Yeah, definitely.
It's also very challenging to test, to develop, because it's on the far end of the spectrum of doing the full speed collapses and all the testing and so on. So it's a bit full on glider to do the development flying on.
Yeah.
But Onno's up to speed now, so I'll have a bit more help this time.
Big things for the Enzo 4 then, mate. That's what we're looking forward to. Luckily it's not ready, but we've got no comp season this year, so the trade-off's not too bad.
No, I think that's. I don't know if I'm being pessimistic, but I don't think there's going to be a paragliding competition this summer anywhere in Europe, for sure.
I mean, I'm of the same opinion of you, from obviously a lot more ignorant viewpoint than yourself, but I just think from looking out, how is it going to be like how are nations going to suddenly open up and start welcoming people to fly paragliders all of a sudden? I think we have a bigger things to worry about.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's more like a year, in fact, especially for international competitions, because if you get on top of it in France and the UK, and if everyone gets on top of it, but what about in Africa or in other places? I can't see how international travel will be going. So but that's good. It helps us. Well, it's not good in any way whatsoever, other than it gives us a bit more time to work on a competition wing, which are minor things at the moment.
Well, for some people it's everything though. For some people right now that is everything.
Yeah.
So when did you so that's what you do for work, mate, and I obviously people I get a full idea of what you're doing at Ozone, but now I want to know a bit more about you and where you came from, your paragliding racing. You're world #1. We need to know how you got there, really, So how did it start? What can you remember your first comp? And where did it go from there?
My first comp was it was probably one of the British Nationals in the late 90s, 98 or something. I didn't compete for the first 5 or 6 years of flying, and back then it was actually quite hard to get into the national championships. It was called the Nationals, and you had to get in through the cross country league, but I didn't do cross country because I was an instructor, the paragliding instructor, so I couldn't go cross country. So I couldn't get into the Nationals for a few years until I wanted to. My first comp, in fact, was a British Open, and I think it was in Piedrahita, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I always knew before I'd done a competition that I really wanted to compete. I don't think I'm a particularly competitive person, but I just saw the beauty in racing paragliders, and that's why I call it the beautiful game, because it to me, since the very first task I ever did, I was just like, this is amazing. And I still get that feeling now. I still, I fly every day. I do a lot of flying. I've done a lot of flying, but I still absolutely adore racing in competitions and racing, with your friends, and all trying to achieve the same thing, and dodging and weaving and trying to get across the line first. I love that whole thing. So yeah, I started back in 96, 97 maybe, I think. I can't remember. And then the following year because I think I got a reasonable result in that competition. I was 20th or something, and that allowed me to get a spot in the Nationals for the following year. And I haven't looked back since. I've just been competing as much as I could and doing the comps I as many comps as I could. I had a bit of success early on. I think in my second year, I won a British Open and finished second in the Nationals, and that gave me self-confidence to kind of push further and go on to more things, really.
Yeah.
And well, I was in the British team in 2001 for the Worlds, and I flew in the Blair. We used to have a Blériot Cup back in the day as well, which was like the B team, the British B team.
Yeah, I heard.
And they were great fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were great fun. It was just a small team that we'd go and we'd fly against the French, and either in France or in the UK, and so that was all really inspiring and good fun, and got me into it. And then to get to where I am now, I mean, when I first joined Ozone back in 2004, I did a couple of seasons where I did a lot of comps. I did 5 or 6 comps in the season, and doing the World Cups, the PWCs, and the Worlds and the Europeans, or whatever was going on at the time. And then for the last 10 years, I've been doing very, very few competitions. I've been doing 2, 3, maybe 4 competitions a year maximum. And the last couple of years, in fact, last year I was losing my mojo a little bit. I was a bit demotivated, and I was a bit kind of I don't know, just demotivated for competition flying. And but Kath, my wife, said, just go out there and do some comps. So I kind of had the backing of the wife, and I actually did 4 competitions last year, and I did okay. I didn't do fantastic. I wasn't spectacular. I haven't won a competition in 9 years or something. So. But I just managed to go to the last few years. I've only done the high quality comps. I've done the best quality World Cups. I've done the super finals and the occasional World Championships. And I do the British Opens as well, because I love the British Opens. It's a good social. It's good to meet up with you and everyone else, and I love that. But for the most of the part, I've only concentrated on doing the good level comps. And I've done all right. I finished 3rd, I finished 4th, I finished 3rd and 4th and 4th and 5th and 6th, and just like that. And that has got me to number 1. Not by anything spectacular, but just not messing up the big comps.
You say that, and it's a little bit self-deprecating, really, because what people might not understand, who are listening, people who paraglider pilots who aren't on the comp scene, paragliding comps specifically reward consistency, and the reason they reward consistency is because the hardest thing to be in a paragliding competition is consistent. So if you're being consistent 4th or 5th or 3rd, if you're consistently within that pool, that does reward you to be the number 1 in the world, because that's the most difficult part of the sport, is to be consistent. Hello, have you got me?
But you're back again. Got you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was saying, it's it should reward consistency, because consistency is the hardest thing to be, and the fact that you can be that consistent 4th, 5th, and you say nothing spectacular, that within itself is the spectacular thing. And I of course, it'd be amazing to win to be on the podium number 1 and stuff. Everyone, like in a race, in any race, that's always a nice thing, right? But that consistency. From someone who's flown a few comps, if I'm consistently coming in the top 20, the Brits, at Peter Heaton, I'm over the moon, because I think, right, okay, now I know if I can be consistent there, my next stage is be consistent here. So for you to be consistent at that top level is, for the people who are listening, who aren't really up on comp flying, that is top 3 crossing the line in a Grand Prix every single weekend. Top 3 crossing the line, allowing for things going wrong, things out of your control, you making mistakes and still getting. Because I've seen you make mistakes in comp and be a little bit behind, and next minute, boom, there's Russ come in orbit faster than everyone. Where's Russ come from? And then and Guy as well. Guy is another person who, when I fly, I can watch him, and I can, like, the man thermals like no other person I've seen. I like how you thermal. I thermal a bit like, I like to get in and crank it and get in there. Guy seems to be floating around as if he's on a merry-go-round, nice and gently, always out climbing everyone and just.
Well,
And I'm
he can't afford to spill his cup of tea on his lap, can he?
like, if he had a cup of tea whilst flying, I wouldn't be shocked. But you guys,
And he
that
does.
consistency, that's the amazing thing. The consistency of you two and yourself, obviously being number one is, yeah, to be fourth and fifth and fourth and fourth and fourth, incredible. And
I think
in
what I was most pleased with the comps I did last year was that on the last day of the comps, I was in a shout to win it.
Mhm.
And that's what I was most pleased with, because that's what ultimately you're aiming for. You know, it's before we've always talked about the mantra of about, you know, it's always about the end game and being in the last thermal in the right position to win the race. But to win the competition, you have to be in position on the very last day, so that you do have a chance of winning the comp. And in the comps I did last season, I was always roughly in that situation, which is what I was most pleased with the whole thing.
Yeah.
But what I do like the I do like flying with the pilots that are really just on it to win. And you know, I work with Ono, whose win rate is super high. He occasionally messes up a competition and finishes in 100th place, but his win rate compared to how many competitions he enters is very high. So that's something I need to work on in my flying, is to try and get back that. And I don't know what it is, because I do try to win each race that I fly in. But I guess at certain critical moments, I'm a little bit tentative. And I think I think that's probably born from mistakes I've made in the past where I've been too aggressive. It's always finding a balance, you know. It's like I always say, it's like tuning its guitar and getting that strum and getting everything correct. And if one part of your flying goes out, you then make an adjustment, and sometimes you adjust too far, and you're constantly making these little adjustments in the way you fly and the tactics and the decisions that you make. But I guess yes, yeah, I'm pleased with what happened last year, and but that's not to say I can't improve, and I need to find really analyze where I went wrong, and which I have done, and I try to tweak it a little bit next time we fly. But I tried that in the British Championships and I bombed out. So it's often I make a tweak and it's like, no, yeah, you know that. So I've been flying long enough now to have made all the mistakes, I think,
Yeah.
and make them over and over again. And I think nothing can. It's hard to beat experience in this game, and I feel fortunate that I have enough experience now to be able to go out and comfortably just roll up to a competition and expecting myself to do well.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the greatest things for paragliding for me is that anyone on their day, one mistake, you've cost yourself the whole day. Just one silly mistake, one being a little bit too eager, one not following anything, any little scenario. As we're like fighting's a bit similar. You make a mistake, it can cost you. But say you're a snooker player, realistically, if you're on your game and you get your head down and you get playing, you play and okay, you can make a little mistake, but you're on with paragliding, the consequences of making that mistake are instantaneous, and generally they're hard to come back from. So that I think that's the great bit. Is it someone like yourself, this far in, world number one, yeah, there's little bits, and obviously there's bits that can be improved on, and that's the great bit is that you go out next year and you're like, right, I really got to work on this, and if you start working on it, you might push too hard, or you might not push enough again, and yeah.
No, that's it. Yeah, it's always the balance, and I think it's the same at any level, any sports, or at any level that, you know, any athlete, every sportsman has to self-analyze, and I'm sure you do it with your fighting, and you'll go over the fights, the ones you did well, and you'll look at how you did well, why you did well, and the same for the ones where you lost and you did badly. So I think, and I think that's the same in any sport. You have to be able to be very and that critical in this game. because we don't have coaches. You know, we have to kind of rely on ourselves to coach ourselves, basically.
Well, I mean, yeah, definitely. But what we've been lucky with lately is the whole BPRA thing. People like myself and the people who are coming through, having yourself and Marlon and Guy and Barney, having you guys there. What you sort of, I mean, again, once we're under our paraglider, it's up to us. If we want to make mistakes, we do it. But the bits that you've given us and those little tips that you've corrected us and shown, like, at questions, why did you take this, those little elements that you've given the BPRA, for me, it's like a fast track. It's like, right, it's like a condensed course. And I think that seems to be showing with British results and stuff, I would say, right? And people like Harry, who's doing so well, you know, that I think the BPRA is really coming into his own, and the people who are really driven, and like Martin had a great season, and I think that's
really impressive.
Yeah, I think that's a direct result from the BPRA and people like yourself and Marlon and the coaching and Guy.
I think I think British paragliding is in the healthiest situation it has been in a generation, and I think we've got some really talented pilots to come through. I think it's still developing. Unfortunately, most of us can't get out and fly as much as we'd like to, and I think that hinders us slightly. But yeah, no, it's really important, and I think it's something that was first started by Jockey and the guys back in the day. Yeah. When I started competing, we did a boot camp, and with Jockey Sanderson and Judy Ledden, who was the multiple world's hang gliding champion at the time. And it was fantastic. We didn't really learn, or I didn't learn anything. I didn't learn anything, but it put everything in place, and it made me aware of what I should be doing, how I should be thinking, and it gave me a great kick up the arse to go on and carry on. And I think that's what, you know, Guy and Barney and Malin and all of us and Guy and myself, you know, we've been flying a long time, since the mid-90s, and we want to leave a legacy. We want to be able to just pass on this information and give it to a group of young, motivated pilots, or not necessarily young, but motivated pilots, to leave a legacy and move it on. And hopefully you guys, or the people in the BPRA, will carry it on and do exactly the same for the next generation of pilots that come through. And hopefully we can get this snowball effect and just keep a very high positive energy in British competitive paragliding.
Yeah,
I think do you know what, results and everything else aside, you know, because we've had Theo's European champion, and we've had good results from the young guys, but more importantly, it's brought a group of people together that have turned into a group of friends, and that for me is the best achievement out of it all, really.
Yeah,
so I'm very happy.
You're not obviously in the UK, but on any given decent day in the UK, generally there's a group of some of us from, you know, like Laurie and those guys up north will be talking, and Guy will be talking to me, and I'll be talking to Harry, and next minute we're all like, boom, we all converge on one little area to try and do something special. Like, we're going to try and fly a record, or we're just going to do this, or we're going to just fly this route, or we'll set ourselves a task. And that's the great thing about it, is that now there is a real camaraderie, and there is a real a sense of like team or mates or teammates in amongst us.
Yeah.
Even though we're not flying as a team yet, but we're teammates, and it is really good. It is really good atmosphere to be involved in.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that healthy, friendly competitiveness is the best way to encourage improvement as well. So hopefully there's more good things to come.
It would be nice to have a female in the team, like, because Kirsty's obviously been holding that up for herself for so long. It'd be nice if
Kirsty and Emma and Jess have been.
Yeah.
So
it's just like it's weird, isn't it? It does, like, these sort of sports just don't attract more females. It's strange.
Yeah, but it's not that surprising, I don't think. It's not that surprising.
Yeah, who wants to go and hang out on a hill with a load of
yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess when you say it like that, it's probably not that Is it? Oh, but so I completely lost my train of thought there, mate. Yeah, I completely lost my train of thought where we were. Oh, well,
We were talking about BPRA. Where are we going now?
Yeah. We were talking about the BPRA. Yeah. So the next stage, I guess, all this year's boot camps and stuff are going to obviously be put to pay, as we know. But hopefully that'll be the project for next year, and we can continue to build on that. The next thing I think for yourself would be, for me, would be safety. Like, I mean, in two-liner especially, I don't want you to go over your safety talk, mate, so I guess you're probably sick and fed up of the one you did on, that's not what it's about, but I feel like, it would be silly to speak to someone with your sort of knowledge and not touch on safety, but safety within two-liner and stepping up to two-liner, because I see a lot of really good level pilots in the UK. They're coming to buy a new wing, and they're already like a D-level pilot or something, and they're looking to maybe trade their new M6, and they're going to get an M7. And I'm like, have you considered like a Xeno, let's say? And I'm like, oh, well, I don't know about the two. I'm like, but you've had like 300 hours on your M6. Like, what is it like? Oh, those two-liners are a little... And I feel like people, they do demand a little bit more respect and a little bit more behaviour when you're controlling them. But I think there's still a bit of a fear surrounding them that maybe they don't necessarily deserve.
I think that's definitely the case, and I think it's why I don't particularly like talking about two-liner safety, because it's no different than safety for all of us, no matter whether it's got 3 lines, 2 lines, 4 lines, whatever. If there's a piece of air that's going to take you out, it doesn't care how many lines you've got. So I think safety is across the whole spectrum, and I think it's about understanding how to really fly a paraglider correctly when it's not flying, which is a very difficult and long process to learn. And the only way you learn is by experience. The only way you can get that experience is by exposing yourself to that danger. So I think, when we take paragliding as a serious sport, and I think most people who do paragliding do it seriously, and if you don't do it seriously, then just don't do it. It's not a game that you can pick up and do when and as you please. You either fly paragliders or you don't. There's no halfway in between. And if you do make that decision to fly paragliders, then you need to do it at the best of your ability. And as you know, it's very easy to fly a paraglider. My grandmother can fly a paraglider, but to be able to fly it correctly, to be able to keep it open in turbulent air, to be able to react correctly when stuff goes wrong, when it stops flying, does take time, effort, danger, and dedication. That's why I've been a very strong proponent over the years of SIV training, because it's the only really effective way that we can get that skill. I think it should be part, and unfortunately it's been good to see in the last few years that it's becoming more of a norm to do the training, and not just to do it once, but to do it on a continuum. And that's the only way you can make paragliding safe, is by exposing yourself to danger by going paragliding in the first place, and exposing yourself to more danger by learning to fly a non-flying wing in a controlled environment. It's much better to learn it in a controlled environment than 50 foot above the hill when you first take a collapse, for example.
Yeah.
But 2-liner, 3-liner, 4-liner, no. If anything, for an experienced pilot, like, one of the chaps you're talking about there that's got 300 or 400 hours on a Aspect T3-liner, then I would argue that moving to a 2-liner makes it safer, because you've got way more control over your angle of attack whilst you're accelerating. And if you're flying a high aspect 3-liner and you're not accelerating a great deal, then there's no point in flying a high aspect 3-liner. Which means that if they are accelerating a lot, they'll probably be safer and have more control on a 2-liner than they would a 3-liner. We're just working on these new risers now with the 3-liners, where we're controlling the B's and the C's, and that makes it a lot closer to the 2-liner feel. But in terms of pure testing, from my experience, I would say aspect ratio has a bigger influence on safety, ease of use, and behaviour of the wing than the quantity of lines that are supporting its chord. Two liners for me. When we go back, going back to the Xeno, for an experienced pilot, flying a Xeno is a relatively simple, straightforward thing to do. It's less demanding than the E&D wings of a decade ago, and it's far more solid, and it's far more easy to control at speed. I mean, that's why I love two-liners, because you've got the wing in your hands all the time. You can be pinning the bar at full speed, and you can bring with your hands immediately, instantaneously. You can bring the wing back to trim speed, and everything in between. And so, you couple that with the active use of speed bar, and you've got something that you can pretty much keep open in most speeds, in most conditions.
Yeah, so it's a discussion I have with friends of mine who are on three-liners, and they've had a few hundred hours on three-liners, and they're just spending the money to get another three-liner. But you talk to them, and they're saying, "Oh yeah, maybe I'll get a Xeno." But I don't understand where your logic's going with this. If you don't feel like you can control the Xeno, you can't control. And I know you can control the M7, so why are you? And yeah, people seem to be so lost in the fact that it's got two lines, and I guess it's the stuff that came before. But some people get so lost in the fact that it's got two lines, and they're not thinking like, if I've got the capability to fly the M7 to its potential, I've got the capability to fly the Xeno to its potential. I may have to maybe go and do another SIV, which I again say that everyone should do every year. That's what I say to my friends and people who I fly with, is that I like to do SIV every year, and everyone should. And I also say it's not even that it's making you safer. SIV is not making you safer. You're understanding what's happening when these things go wrong. So when they go wrong for the first time, you're better off having someone on a radio telling you what's going on than it being above the ground. And the more you do that, the more you understand what's going on, and that makes you safer. But it's hard. I mean, I'm not a coach, and I'm not teaching people. It's hard for me to say people should do this, people should do that. But when people do ask me, that is what I say. And with the two-liner things, I see people with their even C wings and stuff with their handles on, their three-liners with their handles, and they're like, oh, but the handles. I'm like, I don't think you understand just how much input the B lines on a two-liner, how much input they have, how much control you have having those handles compared to your handles you have on your risers, and they get on them and they pull them and they understand, and you can really pilot your wing on those handles. People don't see that. The three-liner guys aren't. They're not.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Wes. That on the other hand, though, the most important thing in flying is fun and pleasure, isn't it? And also being confident under your wing. And if for you personally, going to a two-liner just psychologically freaks you out, then there's no benefit in doing so. It probably won't improve your flying. It probably won't improve your performance, and it certainly won't improve your pleasure. But it's always a difficult line to different balance to strike, isn't there? But I think having a nice steady progression through aspect ratio, through certification classes is really important. And I think most people do it these days. I think most people respect it now. When I started, there were people flying competition wings after 50 hours of use, and 50 hours of flying, and the experienced guys that had 100 hours. I remember one guy in our local club. He had 100 hours, and he was like the wealth of all knowledge. And now I would class someone with less than 1,000 hours a beginner pilot still, but. No, that's a bit harsh. About 500 hours, I'd say.
Well, it depends. Those 1,000 hours could be spent at Ringstead, mate. So they could just be coastal soaring. So.
Yeah.
I like how you said that in one. I'll just take that one back quickly. Yeah, I think
I only say that because I've been beaten by people in competitions with a lot less than 500 hours.
For me, I agree with you. It depends on the psychology of the person. But yeah, for me, so many people talk themselves out of something that I think you're not. The logic's gone. You talked yourself out of it. Fly what
Yeah.
you want to fly and be happy. I'm not. You fly what you want to fly. I'm completely happy with that. But once you start asking me questions and you're talking yourself out, hey ho, you got I think people are still scared of stuff from 10 years ago, maybe with two-liners and
Yeah,
technology.
I think when it has moved on, yeah, I think the original two-liner came back in the open class days, and it was we made the original one was the R10. Before that, we had this thing called the baby HPP. Well, we had the HPP first. That had an aspect ratio of 11.5, I think it was, and a full carbon structure. And it was the most terrifying, horrific wing I've ever flown. And then we had the baby HPP, which had an aspect ratio of 8, but full carbon structure. And that was a bit easier to fly, but it was still very involving. You know, you'd land after flying for a couple of hours on a normal day, and you'd have like that 1,000-mile stare. You know, you've survived. Felt like a Vietnam kind of, suffered from PTSD and stuff. And I did actually have concerns at the time, because if that was the future of competition racing, then it would have just alienated us even more, you know, and made it even more elite and specific sport.
Yeah.
But then after that, we developed the R10, and that glider was a bit of a handful, I think, for many people. I think many people at the time as well. There wasn't at the time the culture we have now of training and SIV and understand how the wing flies properly. So a lot of people were competing, but not really accepting the fact that you have to learn how to fly properly to fly these wings. And it was pretty. There was a lot of incidents and accidents in the first year, and I think that was partly due to the glider, but mostly due to pilots understanding and pilots' ability at the time. What we've seen now is the gliders have got, let's say, 10% better now in terms of safety, ease of use, and so on. But the pilots have got 60-70% better. So the accident rates are going down at the moment. The numbers of reserve deployments are certainly going down in the World Cup. I mean, I used to see people in World Cups take a 50% collapse and end up in a cascading event and ending up throwing the reserve. And you know, there was plenty of opportunities to just let the glider fly or do the right thing at the right time, which were totally missed. And that I see a lot less of now. And I think we've got a younger generation coming through. They've grown up knowing what's what, how to do it, how to go about it. And I felt a little bit guilty. The first time we ever did that boot camp, we had young guys there, and I was sort of saying, what you need to do is get on a comp wing. And that was probably the first person that ever said that to them, because, you know, traditionally in our flying careers, it's like, don't go on a competition wing, stay on your EMB forever. And then I rolled up and said, get on a comp wing. And I felt a bit dodgy about that, but I said it to the right people. And I think as soon as people did jump onto comp wings, they also did the SIV training. They also did all the background work that those type of wings require. And we now have the guys doing very well.
Yeah,
and the reason I say
that
as well, because I've seen the French guys do it. I've seen all this whole generation of young French come through that, you know, they're 20 years old, so they don't have, no matter how long they've been flying, they don't have a great deal of experience, but they're flying competition wings, and they're doing it better than most experienced 50-year-olds that have been flying for 25 years, you know, because they're willing to, they've got the skills, they've got the timing, they've got what it takes to actually fly these wings. And I think when you've got that type of, you have to know who you are as a person, don't you? You know, if you've got the ability to do a triple twist pike whilst juggling, you've probably got the ability to fly a competition wing. Whereas if you need a crash helmet just to walk down the local shops, then it's probably, comp wings are not for you.
No, stick on the Xeno. Keep down on the Xeno, yeah? The thing is as well, you give that advice, but you're in that capacity, you're not there as an instructor at school, you're there to help the progression of comp flying, and for you to pick the right people and say, you need to be on a comp glider. It's not like you're saying, here's my comp glider, you should go and fly that tomorrow. Like, you saying those things is the right advice at the right time in the right environment. That's exactly what you're there for. So then it's up to obviously those people to manage it. Like, how do I make that step? And I know you're more than welcome for somebody to come up to you and say, Russ, you said I need to get on a comp glider. How do I do it? What's the next step? And you'll say, go and speak to Guy. But no, I'm joking. No, I know you'll say to them, like, yeah, well, this is the process, this is what we need to work on, and you'll be there for it. So it is although it's about advice, and people might say, oh, well, it seems a bit harsh to say get on the comp. It is the right advice, and was it the right time, I feel.
Well, for the boot camp, yeah, that was what. The most pleasurable thing about the boot camp is after years of doing guiding where you've got paying customers. I didn't have paying customers, We weren't getting paid for this, so I could be as rude. I could just say exactly. I had a great deal of pleasure shouting at Barney, saying, "Pull your fucking finger out and get over here."
Mate, my favourite of the whole thing of the boot camp was still forever. The first ever boot camp was Joe Dart on the radio. I can't go into it now, obviously, but every time I see him, every time we fly cross country together, I'm on the radio to Joe. I'm like, Joe, like over here. As long as I live, that'll be one of my fondest paragliding memories.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun doing it. We have had a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Mate, so we're just over an hour. What I'd like to know now is what you're doing away from paragliding now. All this is over, mate. What do you do with your time when you're away from paragliding?
Well, I've got a young family. I've got I've got a 14-year-old and a 7-year-old girl. I have a dog. I have a house, which I'm basically a caretaker of my house now. I don't. This is everything. It's like living in 40 towers around here. Something's breaking all the time. My kids tend to break stuff so I really enjoy fixing things, repairing things. I have to enjoy that because what I'm doing all the time. Yeah. I'm trying to fix up a car as well, which is taken a bit of a back burner for the moment. But mostly at the moment I'm.
What car?
It's a Rover P8, which is an old crappy English 70s car. Most people had aspire to like Lamborghini Countach or something like that, whereas my dream car was always a Rover P8. It's mostly driven by doctors, I think, back in the 70s and 80s. So I'm slowly getting that back to how I want it. Just having it working would be nice at this stage. So, and I enjoy the simple things actually. Walking the dog. The dog has been the biggest. Has been a great addition to our family. We have a 3-year-old boxer, so I spend my time walking the dog, doing DIY, spending time with the girls. I've actually really enjoyed this period, just to be with the girls, just to be with the family, and do that. But otherwise, I'm not doing a great deal more. Flying has been such a huge central part of my life, and I'm fortunate that I can do that on a daily basis at work during the week. So come a weekend, I'm not really. I mean, maybe I'll get out once a year on a really good day to go cross country at the weekend. Otherwise, I'm quite happy to be at home and be with the kids and the family.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll get a North-South Cup this year, mate, and you'll have to get over and fly that, definitely. Because even if we have to push it right until the late end of the year, you'll have to get over and fly that this year, just so that you get some flying done.
Well, I did the North-South Cup years ago, and because Hugh and Jim was saying, "Oh, you got to come over," and Jockey was saying, "You got to come over and do this North-South Cup," and I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to go back to the UK to do some flying. I mean, that's just pointless." Anyway, so one year I said, "Right, okay, I'm coming," and I booked my flight, and when I booked the flight, I didn't even expect to get the glider out of the bag.
Yeah.
We went up. Well, the first day we went to Scotland and flew 150k south and landed in the Midlands somewhere.
From Tinto.
No, it was 200. It was 200k, wasn't it? I can't remember now.
Yeah, from Tinto.
Yeah, it was 200k.
Yeah, 200k. Yeah, 196 declared, I think it was, and then the people went on
something like that.
200.
Yeah. And then the following day we flew from Stroud back to Brighton, which is where I was based.
Yeah.
And then the following morning I flew back home, and I was like, I can't believe I just came back to the UK for the North-South Cup and flew 350k in a weekend. So I was made up. So I came the following year, and we had a great flight all the way from the north of Wales down to Crickhowell, I think it was.
Yeah.
And that was just an epic flight as well, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And then the following year, I said, right, well, it can't happen 3 years in a row. It's not going to happen 3 years in a row. So I didn't come. And you had even better conditions,
Lake District. Yeah, Lake District last year was incredible.
Yeah.
So
I will be back for the North-South Cup. It's my favourite sort of competition and flying. And it's not a competition. It's just my favourite sort of flying. And good to hook up with everyone and get some beautiful UK cross country. So I will be back. I don't know if it'll be next year, but I certainly will be back.
Yeah, superb. Mate, before you go, a couple of pieces of advice. One piece of advice for someone who's new in the sport, what they should do to get the most out of the sport. And the other piece of advice is someone who's right on the edge of they want to make the leap to do something more, either racing or step up or something. So one piece of advice for each of those people, mate.
I think for beginner pilots, the best thing you can do is to watch every video, read every book, read every magazine, absorb as much information as you can from every different source, and then get yourself in with a good group of people. Get yourself in with good, positive pilots that are going to steer you sensibly in the correct direction. You want to try and avoid the guys that are a bit too gung-ho, and you also want to avoid the ones that are a bit too negative. You just need to be with the right group of people to be able to develop your own flying. And for people that want to take it to the next level, then you need to come and compete. You need to come and roll for competing for competitions. You need to get out there and do some competitions. Start yourself off with the Shabra Open. Start yourself off with the British Championships, the British Opens, the various national opens. It's always good to get out and do the Dutch and the Belgians or the Nordics or something like that, because you'll meet amazing people from all over the world. And then you can get yourself up to a better standard to fly in the good level competitions like the World Cups, where it is the learning ground. It's the proving ground. It's the learning ground. And by flying with the good pilots regularly, you will improve your flying.
Yeah. Superb. Mate, listen, I'm so appreciative of you coming on, mate, and giving me your time. I could chat to you for
my
ages.
Pleasure. My pleasure, Wesley.
Thank you, man. Like, we've spent hours chatting in person, so I know we would chat for hours. But mate, I'm going to let you go and enjoy your family and the rest of the lovely French weather. But mate, thank you very much for joining me.
My pleasure, mate. You take care.